A $20 bill used to be enough for dinner, some gas, and a morning coffee. Now, it's not enough to fill half the car's tank. Americans still work, still make money, but live in the feeling of being poor every day, even though they have never been unemployed. Across America, from once peaceful suburban neighborhoods to bright urban centers, a new survival economy is forming, where people no longer count dreams, but only every penny left over from the struggle for survival. Cheap stores become shelters, fast meals become financial plans, and happiness, that was once defined by American dream, is now reduced to unpaid bills. The cost of living crisis isn't just crippling the wallet, it's corrupting the soul of a nation that once boasted of being the most prosperous and livable in the world. And perhaps the scariest thing is not the rising price, but the way we are used to accepting it as normal. In today's video, we'll dive into how $20 economy is quietly redefining American life, from middle-class families struggling in the middle of the supermarket to the elderly are counting each pill. Because behind the dry numbers of inflation, there is an America that is gradually exhausted, right in the middle of the very dream they once pursued. Do you dare to believe it? In America, the richest country in the world, more than 63% of workers cannot rotate $500 in an emergency, and most do not have $1,000 in the bank. It is not just a financial number, but a sign of a society that has reached its limit of tolerance. On social media, people no longer show off lavish highlight reel, luxury trips or meals. Instead, there are videos of trembling, tears and sighs. Americans share the despair of not being able to pay their bills, not being able to eat properly, and being mentally insolvent in the midst of escalating cost spirals. A man in Philadelphia recounted in panic, "I'm going crazy. I just talked to the mortgage company and they said my rent would increase from $840 to $991 a month, even though I didn't ask for anything. I don't know how long I can hold out in this desperate economy." A voice among millions of people in the same scene, who still have jobs, still pay taxes, but can no longer control their own lives. Middle class, pillar once considered the pride of America, is now struggling to survive. There are 37.9 million people living in poverty, accounting for 11.6% of the population. Although the United States still holds the top spot in terms of gross domestic product. The actual minimum standard of living for a family of 4 in the US is now $24.16 per hour, while the federal minimum wage has remained stagnant at $7.25. The figure hasn't changed in over a decade. That gap is not just an economic problem, but a deep crack in the foundation of American society. Millions of people are forced to work 2, even 3 full-time jobs just to maintain life at the most basic level. According to MIT data, to be able to live, a middle-class family must work more than twice the capacity of a normal person. Meanwhile, inflation, interest rates, and escalating energy prices cause all expenses from food, gasoline, to home insurance to increase faster than income. As a result, millions of Americans do a lot but are still poor. Labor, once the path to freedom and stability, is now just enough to last day by day. But what is most dangerous is the widespread mental collapse in consumer society. 6 in 10 Americans admit the cost of living is negatively affecting their psychological well-being. Amidst the spiral of economic instability, young people are caught between 2 poles. On one side are super saver, radical cutters, living in fear of falling into poverty. On the other side is revenge spender, spending as a way to escape the suffocation of reality. Post-pandemic, these 2 trends go hand in hand in a bitter paradox. Savers are exhausted by fear, spenders are exhausted by debt. Lifestyle creep, the phenomenon of spending growing faster than income, has crept into the whole class considered successful. Many people earning more than $100,000 a year still admit they are living paycheck to paycheck, meaning that with the loss of a pay period, everything will collapse. In a society where self-worth is tied to spending levels, people are both in debt and in sin. They do not dare to spend because they are afraid of missing, nor do they dare to stop because they are afraid of falling behind. People who still have jobs but are stuck between rent, insurance, and inflation bitterly admit, we are not poor on paper, but poor in practice. And that is the most painful paradox of modern America. Survival has now become a privilege. When it becomes a luxury to eat well, have a roof over your head, or pay your bills on time, the economy is no longer a system that serves people. But people are exhausted to serve to maintain that system. The cost of living crisis in America is no longer just a story of the poor. It is creeping into even peaceful neighborhoods where middle-class families used to believe that had stable jobs and a roof was synonymous with safety. But in the current economy, even homeowners are no longer sure how long they can keep it. The spike in home insurance, property taxes, and mortgage rates has made home ownership, once a symbol of freedom and success, become a burden on the shoulders of millions of households. A case in point, a Philadelphia man said his mortgage increased from $840 to $991 per month, just because home insurance premiums were adjusted from $2,600 to $3,400 per year. He didn't ask for compensation. There were no incidents, but still had to pay nearly $150 per month just to continue living in his own house. And this is not an isolated story. It reflects a trend spreading across the country where the fixed cost of having houses is growing faster than the pace of salary growth. As insurance prices, electricity, water bills, and local taxes escalate together, house, what was once an American dream, is gradually turning into a counting burden. Every month, people have to choose between paying off debt, repairing leaks, or cutting down on necessities. Home ownership no longer brings a sense of stability, but a constant worry about the next payment. The American dream, built on the belief that each person can rise through labor and buy a home for their family, is being distorted by the financial system it creates. Rates readjusted after the pandemic surprised many as loans increased by hundreds of dollars a month, while earnings remained flat. These homeowners were once the pride of middle-class America, are now tied down in a chain of escalating costs they can't escape. Today, home ownership is no longer an achievement, but an invisible mortgage trap that forces people to work tirelessly to pay for expenses they cannot control. Not everyone has lost their home, but many have lost something more precious: the sense of security the home once provided. This is clear evidence that the current US economy not only makes it difficult for the poor to live, but also erodes the class that was once considered the most resilient. As the dream of home ownership turns into fear of being taken away, home sweet home is no longer a promise, but a warning about an America struggling to keep its own home. After the pandemic, millions of Americans left traditional jobs in the belief that economic gig, working for Uber, DoorDash, Amazon Flex or Instacart, would bring more freedom and income flexibility. They are promised that just hard work can master time, make money according to productivity, and get rid of the old machinery of the office. But reality proves the opposite. Behind that glamorous shell is an illusion of work, where people do more than ever but receive less than ever. As reflected by a series of drivers and delivery people, gig workers' net income has dropped 40–50% compared to the pre-pandemic period. The reason is not because they do less, but because gasoline costs, car insurance, vehicle depreciation, and platform fees have all skyrocketed. An Uber driver said, "Customers pay $60, I only receive $16. The remaining is almost 3/4 of the amount flowing into the platform's discount, advertising, and commission system. The gig workers are no longer the free master as advertised, but become employees of the algorithm. They have to run constantly to keep their rating, fear account locked down, and constantly pursue rush hour bonus, which is never enough to cover the actual cost. With the same workload, they have to work 20–30% more hours to maintain the same income level, true to the new paradox of the times: work more, earn less. The revenue structure of modern service platforms not only exploits labor, but also transfers all risks to the worker. No health insurance, no benefits, no breaks, no unemployment benefits. A tire blowout, a sick day, or a small accident are enough to cost them a week of income. The freedom they were initially promised was just a glossy coat of unprotected labor models, where humans were replaced as easily as data flows on the application. This situation is not limited to drivers or delivery. Millions of college degree holders, used to be middle class, are now also caught up in the gig work spiral. They submitted hundreds of job applications without receiving a response, eventually taking temporary, low-paying jobs with insufficient living costs. Unemployment is no longer a jobless, but a job that still doesn't make ends meet. As a result, a flexible labor market is gradually turning into a temporary labor spiral, where people can only live if they work continuously. No holidays, no guarantees, no cumulative future. In a society where more and more people go to work, the poverty rate still does not decrease because labor is no longer the path to stability, but the only means to avoid falling to the bottom. America used to be proud to be the land of opportunities for hard-working people. But today, that model is shifting into a low-cost human power economy, where humans are no longer the center of the system, but the fuel for it to operate. And when work loses the meaning of progress, work is no longer a pride, but just a way to delay the collapse. Amid a wave of inflation and escalating living costs, Americans are creating an unprecedented economic model in history: refund economy. If in the past they used to consume to enjoy or express themselves, now millions of people are consuming just to survive. Supermarkets and e-commerce platforms are witnessing an unprecedented phenomenon. More and more people are returning every product they buy, from food, clothes to household items, just to receive a few dozen dollars in cash back. One woman shared that she had to return both the package of pita cakes and the jar of cherry jam to have enough money to refuel for work. It is no longer the usual saving behavior, but the financial survival strategy of a society that is running out of cash flow. On social networking platforms, a series of topics are rampant: refund hacks, survival by returning goods, how to live off food banks. People who were once loyal customers of Amazon or Target now become people living on refund, taking advantage of every return policy to maintain a minimum standard of living. In viral video tutorials, people no longer talk about the best deal, but discuss which way to return goods fastest and still get cash. This phenomenon is not simply a consequence of tight pockets, but a mirror reflecting a profound social shift. The world's largest consumer economy has left the shopping philosophy to express itself. Instead, shopping to survive. The phrase refund diet, refund mode, was born as a new symbol for the austere period. Cutting back on everything non-essential, from the fun of eating to entertainment to the shopping habits once considered typical of Americans. For many families, refund has now replaced the budgeting concept. When savings have run out, credit cards have hit the ceiling, refunds become financial instruments end. Where each item is viewed as a temporary loan, capital recovery can be, if necessary. The American people are calculating every bill, every refund, every penny left, not to save, but to hold out for another week. The economy used to be run on hope, and shopping habits is now living on the return. A distorted cycle where the American people are no longer looking for consumer pleasure, but just looking to return what they used to believe was the American dream. If The American dream was once built on the belief that anyone can rise up through personal effort. Then today, that dream is mortgaged by a 22% interest rate. America, growth and consumption leader, is stuck in a huge consumer debt spiral, where every dollar spent carries a piece of the bound future. Total credit card debt in the US has surpassed the $1 trillion threshold, the highest level in history. This number not only represents people's purchasing power, but is a sign of collective despair, an economy that forces people to borrow to live. While the average credit card interest rate has increased to more than 22%, many retail cards reach 33% interest, causing all spending to double in just 1 year. According to statistics, 46% of Americans are using credit cards for emergency expenses such as medical care, car repairs, or housing bills, basic needs that should be within monthly affordability. Consumer debt is now no longer a consequence of extravagance, but a survival response of people to the cost of living that far exceeds real income. The average American currently carries $6,000 in credit card debt, $600 in student loans per month, and more than $1,900 in rent or mortgages. It is the financial picture of a society where every income is deposited by before being earned. As cumulative COVID savings have dried up, millions of people start living on 22% interest. Means surviving on credit at the most expensive price of the financial system. This loop creates a self-sustaining mechanism. Debt loop. People work to repay debt, then borrow more to continue working. Debt becomes the fuel for the economy, but also the sophisticated necklace of the middle class. While real income doesn't rise, minimum payments only help them maintain the illusion that they still have control over finances, until a sudden bill pulls the whole system down. The irony is that the American consumer credit structure was once hailed as a symbol of faith in the future, a model that allows people to borrow today to live better tomorrow. But when inflation and the cost of living devour all income, credit is no longer a bridge to opportunity, but a trap for future mortgages. Now, Americans no longer dream of financial freedom. They just hope to pay off this month so they can move on to next month. And as debt becomes a condition for survival, American dream, which once symbolized hope and effort, has been suffocated in the endless spiral of numbers called debt loop. After years of living in a spiral of debt, inflation, and escalating costs, America is approaching a collective psychological breaking point. Prolonged economic insecurity not only drains people's pockets, but also erodes the belief that if they work hard, they will be rewarded. Now, in silence, a wave of resistance is spreading, not by protest, but by silent retreat from the consumer wheel. More and more people are announcing to stop shopping, cutting all non-survival spending. No more new phones, no more designer clothes, no more small fun used to be a way to ease the pressure of life. They call it no spend challenge, but in essence, it is a form of economic disobedience, a passive response to a system that makes them tired and exhausted. I no longer believe that working hard will make me better. This confession, appearing more and more on forums, is a clear testament to the breakdown of social, economic trust. If American dream used to rely on the belief that personal effort could be exchanged for the future, now that very premise is collapsing from within. Even though workers still have stable jobs, they all admit that they are only one pay period away. Every cost increase, every medical bill, every lost hour could push them into financial crisis. The concept of stable in modern America is almost defunct. Instead, there is the constant fear that with just a small slide, a lifetime will plummet. This is the structural breaking point of the world's largest economy. When society no longer believes that labor can be exchanged for progress, the core motive, belief in fairness in the future, also disappears. People are no longer the driving force of growth, but become a factor in retreating from it. And when survival becomes resistance, the based consumer behavior of the US economy begins to self-destruct. Businesses lose customers, workers lose income, and the production cycle consumes, credit gradually slows down. No one took to the streets, no one smashed, but that silence echoed more than any protest. It was the sound of a society losing faith in the very rules it once created. At this point, Americans are no longer struggling to get rich. They are just struggling not to be crushed by a system that has gotten out of human control. When the consumer economy can no longer feed the people who built it, a segment of Americans are leaving the traditional wheel to regain control of their lives. Amid the cost of living crisis, inflation and broken trust, they chose a different direction. Live autonomously, be self-sufficient, and save themselves. The trend of off-grid living, living apart from electricity, water, and commercial services, is spreading from the Appalachian Mountains to suburban Arizona. Small communities sprang up. People grew their own vegetables, collected rainwater, exchanged goods, and shared solar energy. At the same time, the community rebuilding movement appeared, where neighbors contributed to building houses, teaching children, and protecting livelihoods together without relying on governments or businesses. These are no longer isolated groups or extremist tendencies. It has become a survivalist social response. Americans now switch from expecting to help to save themselves. They cut debt, hoard food, learn basic skills, from repairing, cooking, to farming. They build small communities based on exchange and support instead of competition. For many people, this is not an ideal choice, but a last resort defense in an economy where instability becomes the new normal. The foundation of this shift is a loss of trust in the financial and political system. Once promised that if you work hard, you will be rewarded. After cycles of crisis, student debt, healthcare, and inflation, that promise became hollow. People understand that no one comes to save them. No government, no business, no banks. And so they started rebuilding from scratch in their own way. This process of restructuring society towards self-sufficiency, self-survival shows that a new America is forming, a survival economy beyond its own control. There, value is no longer measured by credit score or assets, but by the ability to sustain life and support each other. But along with that wave of awakening comes a big question. When people no longer see the state and the market as their support, what will America have left to unite them? Trust, what was once an invisible thread connecting this country, is gradually cracking. And when each person is forced to create an escape plan for themselves, the collective dream, called American Dream, risks dissolving into millions of small dreams that are alone, quiet, and separate from each other. From the cold numbers of debt and inflation to the grueling stories of the working class, the $20 survival economy is not just an economic phenomenon, but a mirror of an America struggling with its own promise. A country that once believed that hard work would bring freedom, that labor would come in exchange for the future, is now seeing people who work more than ever, but live less than ever. In the bright light of sleepless cities, there are millions of people trying to keep themselves awake. Not to dream, but not to fall. Amid brilliant billboards and record GDP numbers, there is another America that exists silently. The America of unpaid bills, of half-cut meals, of the fear called lost everything after just one salary period. If you feel this story is worth pondering, please like, share and subscribe so we can continue our journey to discover the real side behind the rum. Numbers where Americans are still fighting every day, not to become rich, but just to live properly. The content in this video is designed to reflect the ongoing social, economic phenomenon in the United States, based on public data sources, academic reports, and actual sharing from people. The purpose of the video is not to judge, hold political or personal responsibility, but to help viewers gain a deeper understanding of the changes in the lives and values of today's American working class. The images, quotes, and figures presented are analytical and illustrative, not representative of the entire US economy or the views of any organization, business, or state agency. The author discourages extremist behavior, calls for resistance, or spreads negative stereotypes about any group of people. All content is expressed with the spirit of objectivity, humanities, and respect for social truth. The ultimate goal of the video series, The $20 Survival Economy, is to spark reflection, share a multi-dimensional perspective, and remind that behind every statistic is the real life of people trying to survive in an increasingly uncertain world.